Before you can even start stitching, there are a few essential steps you need to take in order to set yourself up for success. Blah, that's so much to say. In this video, I'll walk you through all the things you need to do before you start stitching. Whether you're brand spanking new to embroidery or just need a refresher, this guide will make sure you're ready to go. If you're curious about any of the supplies I use in this video, they will be linked down in the description. Some are available through my website, and then some will be available through my Amazon affiliate. I'll be using a single layer of Kona cotton fabric and a bamboo embroidery hoop. I'm going to begin by separating the inner and outer ring from one another by unscrewing this screw at the top here. Depending on the quality of hoop that you get, the top might be a little more difficult to unscrew. And if that's the case, at the top, most hoops do have this little screw that you can put a screw in to unscrew it. I just use pliers if I'm having a difficult time unscrewing it, but it's totally up to you. Once this is loose enough, I'm going to separate the inner and outer ring. I'm going to grab the inner ring and place it down on a hard surface. Then I'm going to grab our fabric and lay it on top of the inner ring. Now I'm going to grab the outer ring and place it back on the inner ring like this. And now I am going to tighten the hoop again. Now that I feel that the hoop is tight enough, I want to make sure the fabric is also tight in the hoop. As you can see here, the fabric is pretty loose, and we don't want this while we're stitching because it just makes it really difficult. So what I'm going to do is work my way around the hoop, slowly pulling the fabric at the edge of the hoop. The reason we go all around the hoop when we're tightening our fabric instead of just on one side is because we want to make sure the fabric is even in the hoop. If we just did it on one side, then the fabric would just all be pulled to one side and then it would be just uneven, and that's not what we want. So yeah, I just work my way around the hoop, lightly pulling at the edge of the fabric in the back here. If you notice the fabric isn't tightening, it's possible that you just need to tighten your hoop a little bit more at the top here. We want our fabric to sound like a drum while it's in the hoop, so it should sound something like this. For me personally, this is too much fabric to have on the outside of my hoop. I know that when I stitch, I'm going to keep getting my needle and thread stuck in this fabric, so I'm going to trim around the edge of my hoop. And I leave maybe roughly about an inch around, but you can do whatever works for you. And I am just going to work my way, trimming around the hoop using my zigzag scissors. And these scissors keep your fabric from fraying at the end. They're not necessary, but they are helpful. I do recommend them, but once again, you do not have to have them. You can use regular scissors. I do have these linked in my Amazon affiliate, which will be linked in my bio. And for example, if you look at the fabric at the edge here, you can tell it's fraying some. This is completely normal, but the zigzag scissors just keep that from happening as much. So that is why I use them. And now this hoop is ready for some stitching. Next up is thread length. The rule of thumb for measuring your thread is to fully extend your arm and to measure it from your hand to your shoulder. So this is my ideal thread length right here. Remember that the more thread that you have, the more thread there is to knot up. So if you're using like really long strands of thread, your thread is probably knotting up a lot. It's going to be really difficult to work with. So now that this is my ideal thread length, I am going to trim it. Not everyone separates their thread, but I do lots of times. I typically use 3 strands of thread. Each spool of thread typically has 6 strands. So to separate your strands in half, you can just grab 3 in one hand and then 3 in the other. So I have 3 strands in each hand. To separate it, I'm actually going to put this bottom part here in my mouth. If you have a long hair, make sure it's behind your shoulder because this could get caught in your hair and it hurts. You can also hold it between your legs or your knees or something. Perfect. And that's how you can separate them in half. And I always make sure they unwind. If you ever want to separate one strand at a time, you can do that by lightly pinching the ends of your thread with one hand like this. With your other hand, just grab that single strand and then lightly pull it away while lightly pinching on the other strands like this. And there you go. So now you can just nicely straighten this back out, and then you have your single strand of thread right here. For threading a needle with your needle threader, you are going to insert the hook of your threader into the eye of your needle, and you can let the needle sit on this little loop or whatever you want to call that right there. Then I'm going to grab my thread. I'm going to put it in this hook right here, like this. Now I'm going to grab my needle and then pull it through the hook like this, and there you go. Now your needle is threaded. If you don't have a needle threader, all I do for threading my needle, I just grab the very end of my thread and I'll put the end in my mouth and smush my lips on it and then pull it out to flatten it. So you see how that's a little bit flatter, smoother to go into the needle. Now you can just take your thread and then insert it into the eye of your needle. Then pull it all the way through. Beautiful. To make sure your thread is secure in your fabric while you're stitching, you are going to want to tie a knot at the end of your thread. So I have my needle on one end and then the end of my thread on the other. So I am going to tie the knot at the very end. Now you can tie a single knot, just very simple, like this. This gets the job done perfectly, or you can tie a quilter's knot, which I really like doing. Because for instance, if you wanted to tie like a double knot at the end of here, it could be a little difficult to try to tie the knot on top of the single knot. I mean, it's not like that hard. I did it perfectly here, of course, but typically I have a little bit of a harder time. But I typically use a quilter's knot. To do a quilter's knot, take your needle and put it up against your finger like this, with the pointed part of your needle sticking out. Then grab the end of your thread and put it in between your finger and your needle like this. And the knot's going to go right here. So if you want a longer tail of thread in the back, you could make it longer like this. Or if you want it really short, like I typically do, I pull it up against here. I just feel like I have more control with the quilter's knot. Now I am going to take this thread here, and I want this to be a double knot, so I'm going to wrap it around the needle twice. With this finger and this thumb, I am going to pinch the thread that I wrapped around the needle, and with my opposite hand, I'm going to grab the needle and I'm going to pull it through while still lightly pinching the thread that I wrapped around the needle with my other hand like this. And then just like that, you have a quilter's knot. Tying a knot in the back of your fabric is really easy. Insert your needle under a couple previous stitches, and you are going to pull your needle all the way through, but not your thread. So once your thread creates a little loop like this, you can just insert your needle into that loop and pull it all the way through, creating a knot. I typically do that one more time just to be extra safe. So insert my needle under some previous stitches, pull my needle all the way through, but not my thread. Once my thread creates a small loop like this, insert your needle into the loop and pull it all the way through. And that's all you do for tying off your thread in the back of the fabric. And now you can trim it. Perfect. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments below. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.